Welcome to the One City, One Book program for the City of Agoura Hills. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Before we get started, we have a few people we would like to thank, without whom this night would not be possible. Thank you, One City, One Book Committee, for their hard work throughout the past couple of months. Thank you, the Agoura Hills Friends of the Library, for supporting this event and for supporting the library. Thank you, Agoura Hills Library, and thank you, Cultural Arts Council, for your ongoing efforts to support the arts here in Agoura Hills. At this point, I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening. A graduate of the University of Missouri School of Journalism, managing editor of the Acorn newspaper, an award-winning journalist, writer, and editor, and local resident of Agoura Hills. Please help me welcome to the stage John Losing. And now to introduce our guest for this evening, the mayor of the city of Agoura Hills, Mr. Chris Anstead.
First, I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. It's great to see everyone here. And in fact, we've got a lot of dignitaries in the crowd here tonight. Just sitting in front of me, actually, I see one of our ex-mayors, Jack Koenig. We have one of our other ex-mayors, Joan Yakavone. We have our first mayor, I know, that's here, and ex-state senator, Fran Pavley, in the back. And we also have, I'm kind of trying to throw all the names in there to get them all out. I know because we have so many dignitaries tonight. We also have current city councilman Jeremy Wolf here with us. We also have Mayor Pro Tem Elise Buckley-Weber here with us tonight. And also former Mayor John Edelston is also here tonight. And also Darlene McBain, our former mayor, as well, here with us tonight. Thank you all for coming out tonight. So I'm here to introduce our speaker, and I want to try to give him due. Tonight's guest is an individual whose political career in Los Angeles has spanned 4 decades, serving on both the LA City Council and LA County Board of Supervisors. He played a central role in shaping Los Angeles. He was raised in Boyle Heights with his sister. He is the son of Jewish immigrants born in Ukraine. He was exposed at an early age to community and public service. He received an MA in history and a BA in economics and history from UCLA, where he currently teaches public policy and history. While serving in elected office, he fought hard to preserve open space in the Santa Monica Mountains. As an LA County Board Supervisor, he crafted legislation that reversed many extensive development policies, ultimately protecting the scenic ridgelines and reducing the amount of grading allowed in the Santa Monica Mountains. He is one of LA's powerful and consequential elected officials, sparking major reforms in policing, transit, land use, and fiscal policies. Married to the love of his life, Barbara Edelston, for more than 50 years until her passing in 2018. They have a son and daughter, David and Mina. With his strong connections to Agoura Hills, his brother-in-law is the former mayor of Agoura, John Edelston. He has always been a supporter and advocate for the city of Agoura Hills. Ladies and gentlemen, an evening with Arthur, I present you with Zev Yaroslavsky.
Nice, Zev. Oh, again, thank you, everybody, for being here. Such a lovely evening. I'm honored to be here. I know that Zev probably had his eye on the LA Times more than once or twice during his years in public office, but I'm sure he picked up our tiny Acorn maybe once or twice. So as editor of the paper, I'm honored to be here tonight. On stage with a gentleman who really absolutely helped define LA City, LA County politics. LA City becomes a global force really under his time in the council. And he also helped see it in the county through some really trying financial times, and a man whose policies and who helped shape the policies that really made this crown jewel section of LA County where we live tonight what it is. I mean, all you have to do is look out that window, the beautiful hills and open spaces to see some of his handiwork. And by his, Zev, I mean the man upstairs, not you. Don't get too cocky here. So. All right, we'll get to you in a minute. It's all good. Yeah, staunch liberal voice, feared, admired, a gentleman who also had some sound fiscal sensibilities, which served him well, and a tough guy at times, but also whip smart, charming, and certainly a hero to the Santa Monica Mountains. We know that. So, ladies and gentlemen, one more time, a big welcome to Zev Yaroslavsky. There we go. How are we doing so far? Fair, unfair? Okay, it's all good.
The mayor needs to work on
He needs to work.
Russian.
I knew he was going to botch that. You've been retired from public service, public life for some 10 years now. How's retirement treating you?
Oh, almost 9 years. It's treated me real well. I've been, I took 6 months off. Had an old friend of mine who later in life became the administrator of NASA, the space agency, who called me when he heard that I was retiring, and he said, "I'm going to give you one piece of advice: do nothing for a year, and things will fall into your lap you never even dreamed of." And I said, "Well, I'm not looking for anything to fall in my lap, but I don't have a year to take off." I took 6 months off, and it was the best thing not the best thing I ever did, but certainly at that time it was a very wise thing. One of the things about retirement, which I haven't been retired. After 6 months, I went to UCLA. They recruited me to do what I wanted to do. They didn't have to twist my arm. I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach graduate students in public policy, and they gave me the opportunity also to teach a seminar on post-World War II LA history, which I thought I knew a lot about, but I've learned more about LA. I wish I'd known when I first got elected, and I do an annual survey, quality of life survey, countywide, which gets quite a bit of attention. And so I've been really busy. I don't have a staff. I don't have a secretary, and I make a lot of mistakes in my scheduling. And but I'm enjoying it a lot. The one thing I want to tell you that happened, I was just talking to somebody who retired, and about 2 weeks after I left office, middle of December of 2014, I woke up one day and it felt really almost really felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders that I never knew existed until it wasn't there. And for 40 years I was in public office, and I really took it as all the elected officials here, especially at this level, understand. You have to take the job seriously, and whenever anything goes wrong, when somebody gets burglarized or somebody gets shot, in my district, we had quite a bit of that. You feel like you're somehow personally responsible. What could I have done to stop it? And that builds over 40 years. So when I left, all of a sudden I realized this wasn't my problem anymore, at least in the official capacity. And that's good. People ask me whether I miss it. Somebody asked me a minute ago whether I miss it. I don't miss it at all. The two things I do miss is giving away a lot of taxpayer money. Like buying big properties around the Santa Monica Mountains. I can't write a check anymore for $13 million. And I miss working with smart people. I had a really smart staff, and contrary to popular belief, bureaucrats, civil servants, there are a lot of very smart people at the city level, and especially at the county level. Some of the best people in their professions, in their areas, are there. So if you're really a wonk, and I'm kind of a wonk, and you want to do something and get things done, you've got the best minds in the business to help you figure out a way to solve a problem or create something. And that's what I miss, but I don't miss the politics.
Well, you dedicate the book to your late wife, Barbara Edelston, sister of John Edelston, former city council member who's here tonight. Your own mother dies of cancer at a very young age when you were young. And you say in the book that you really couldn't bear to have your heart broken again. But Barbara dies in 2018. What does she mean to you?
What does she mean to me? Well, her brother is sitting here. I got to say something. By the way, when I swore John in as mayor of Agoura Hills many years ago, I remember the line I used. I said, "At least there's one mayor in our family." Well, Barbara, as you'll see in the book, we were not husband and wife. We were a team. We were a pair. She wasn't, to quote the Hillary Clinton line, she wasn't, the Tammy Wynette stand by my man. She had her own. First of all, she loved people, and I didn't love people as much as she did. She loved being around people. I like to kind of watch the ball game at night, and but we had to go out every night, and she wanted to go to a banquet. I said, we don't have to go to that banquet. She said, no, you should go and be seen. And the minute she walks in there, the whole ballroom gravitated towards her. She was just a people person. When she died, the rabbi who was performing the funeral service asked me, what did she like? What were the things that, this is just his way of getting me to come out of my shell. And I said, well, the thing she loved the most was people. And she loved to love people, and she couldn't help but help people all the time. It drove me nuts. Somebody died and they needed to expedite the autopsy. At 10 o'clock at night, she'd call the coroner. She had a really good relationship with the coroner. She was like it was a team. My mom and dad were known as Mina and David. That was, you never talked about my mother or my father. And over the years, that's what it became with me and Barbara. She was, you mentioned that story I tell about not wanting to have my heart broken. When I was first dating her, I don't even think you know this, John, but I know you know this. She was working at a camp one summer in 1967 or 68, and we write each other letters. Her camp was up in Big Bear. We'd write each other letters twice a day. I mean, I actually have the letters. And I couldn't believe it. I said, I wrote her 2 letters in the same day, and she'd write me 2 letters in the same day. And there was I wrote something to her because I don't have the letters. Your mom hijacked them from us. But I had written something to her that caused her to write me a letter back that says, if you will love me, I will love you forever if you let me. I blew it all. I will love you forever if you let me, which is the dedication to the book, which is 3 pages long. It's the best written piece in the book. I was going to use one of the great 19th century poets' lines, and then I found out that there was an issue of whether I had to get their copyright and all this. And then I found this letter, and I said, this is better than the poem. And that's really what, she knew that I had trouble trusting, getting into a long-term relationship, because I was traumatized. My mother died when I was 10, and you lose your mother, and at least in my case, and you're afraid that if you get too close to somebody, you're going to have your heart broken again. And she figured that out pretty darn quick, and that's the line she used. And boy, did she live up to her promise.
Well, before we get into the nitty-gritty of politics, let's start at the beginning, the very beginning. You're the son of Jewish immigrants from the Ukraine. How did your ancestry really help shape the man that you were to become?
Well, obviously my mom and dad influenced my life as any pair of parents will do, except that I never knew my mother as a young adult or even as a teenager. I knew her at the end as a 10-year-old. So much of what I know about my mother, I know from my sister, who's 8 years older than I am, and from the hundreds and hundreds of people who were her students and my dad's students. But my mother was one of these teachers. If I asked you to name 3 of your best teachers, she'd be on the list. She's just one of those remarkable people. And to this day, I have people who were her students, and they tell me about her. They tell me an anecdote or this or that, and so over the years, because I was well known in my constituency, I learned a lot about her. So, but I know about her from what I knew about her from my dad, and I knew what she had done in the community and the kind of teacher she was. And both my parents were union leaders in their little union. They were both Hebrew teachers. My mom taught Hebrew at LA City College. It's a great story I tell in the book. It was a very controversial issue. Some of you probably didn't agree with me on this. That's too bad. But there was an issue about removing the Christian cross from the county seal. We were threatened with a lawsuit in 2004 by the ACLU. And our lawyers, as the politicians here will tell you, the council members, lawyers never give you a yes or no answer. On the one hand, you could win, but on the other hand, you could lose. And one of my old colleagues used to say, "I want to meet a one-handed lawyer." But our lawyer told us we will lose this case if we don't settle it, and if we don't agree to remove the cross from the county seal. And we did, and it was a 3-2 vote on the Board of Supervisors, and the you-know-what hit the fan. And the phone it was a national story. Bill O'Reilly, Dennis Prager, all these people with national audiences were pounding on the Board of Supervisors every day, and our phones were ringing off the hook. And I told my secretary, I want to go up to because it was brutal. I mean, it was just plain brutal, ugly. And my secretaries had to take all those incoming calls. I didn't. So I told my secretary, I said, I'm going to go up in the front, and I'm going to start taking the calls with them, just as a sign of solidarity. And she says, yeah, that would be really nice. And I said, yeah, they're really working hard. She says, no, because it'll be nice because they don't really understand why you took this position. My secretaries didn't know. And I said, oh, well, this is even better. So the first call I get, hi, my name is Betty Yasmani, and I want to speak to the supervisor. I said, this is the supervisor. She said, no, I want to speak to Zev. I said, this is Zev. You're him? I said, yeah, I'm him. And she was, had an angry tone in her voice. And then she says, well, before I tell you what I called about, your mother was my Hebrew teacher at LA City College in 1955. And I'm an Armenian Christian, and I wanted to study Hebrew and blah, blah, blah. And we had this nice chat about my mother, and she told me all the wonderful things about her. And then she really didn't want to talk about the cross anymore. She said, I called about the cross, you know what my position is, but thanks. So I said, I want to ask you a question. Why did an Armenian Christian, 18-year-old, take Hebrew at LA City College in 1955? She says, well, I was raised on Armenian at home, and I wanted to learn another complicated language. And I said, well, you sure picked a good one. But that's the way it was. When I first ran, I was redistricted out to the San Fernando Valley as a councilman. LA Times reporter wanted to follow me around walking precincts. The first door I knocked on, a woman opens the door, and I said, hi, I'm Zev Yaroslavsky. I'm your new councilman. I'm running for re-election. She says, oh, your mother was my teacher. And I had to beg the reporter to believe me when I said this wasn't a setup, this is random. But it happens all the time. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, somebody told me the same thing. My mother died pretty young. And so, yeah, she was influenced. Now, having said that, the first chapter of the book's about my mother's father, my maternal grandfather. I'm not going to spoil the book for you, but he was a remarkable human being, and he's the person who, if I'm asked who would be the one person you'd like to meet if you had the opportunity, it wouldn't be Sir Isaac Newton or Moses or Jesus Christ or anybody. No, I want to meet my maternal grandfather because he was an idealist. He was also a Hebrew teacher, a Hebrew scholar. He was part of that generation in the late 19th century that transformed the Hebrew language from one of scripture, which it was for 2,000 years, to one of functionality. There was no word for sofa, in the Bible. But now you had verbs and subjects and objects, and he was part of that generation. And he was, it's timely or untimely to talk about it, but he was one of the early labor Zionists in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. And was very active in that. The second president of Israel came from his town, it was kind of a hotbed of labor Zionism. So he was a guy who bridged literally the 19th century and the 20th century, and then from my family point of view, he bridged my ancestry with the president. He gave me. By osmosis, he died 8 years before I was born, but he gave me the idea that you could do big things, and you could be a peasant, which is what, economically speaking, teachers didn't make a lot of money in Ukraine in the early 20th century. You could be something, you could do something, if you could. And he was a big dreamer. If you dream big, you can do it. And the older I got, the more I got to appreciate it. And so I actually went back to his birthplace, which I talk about in the book. It's now in Western Belarus, but it was Lithuania at the time. I went there twice. I went once on my own, and then the other time I took my whole family. My sister and her husband went, and my 2 kids and I went. And just it's a little hamlet. It's got 2 streets and about 50 bungalows, and out in the middle of nowhere. And that's where my life began, is the way I looked at it. So yeah, those are the people who influenced my life.
So at a very young age, this guy's really involved. You know, some young men are sports prodigies or what have you, but his politics is in your blood from an early age. And we're still in high school here, and I think you and your classmates are debating Vietnam and LBJ, and you describe yourself as a shy kid who speaks in low-key monotones. You still do. But you break out of your shell, and you suddenly become more of a leader, and you're able to take charge of some of these issues at a young age, so it's pretty astounding.
Yeah, I was shy, and I suspect I still am shy. The difference between me and Barbara was that when we walked into a ballroom, she'd work the room. She wasn't the politician. I was the politician. I didn't want to work. I had a hard time when I first got started saying, "Hi, my name is Zev Yaroslavsky. You know, what's yours?" If you're interested in talking to me, come up to me and introduce yourself. I'm not going to be the initiator. I'm just a shy person. There wasn't shy about doing stuff, but I was shy about the retail political stuff. But I learned it from her. I just saw the way she operated. And I had to do it. It was part of the requirement, job description, if you will. And so I wasn't shy in high school in the positions I took and in arguing with my teachers. And I almost didn't graduate. I was almost not permitted to graduate on the high school. Fairfax High School was my alma mater. And I had a teacher who was very pro-Vietnam War. I was in the 12th grade. I was the first semester of the 12th grade, and he's pontificating about how important this war is. And I'm looking at my calendar, and I'm 6 months away from being draft age. Who the hell are you? And so I started arguing with him, and in a civil way, and then I got an unsatisfactory in cooperation. All you teachers understand. And in those days in the LA Unified, if you got 2 unsatisfactories, they wouldn't let you graduate on stage with the rest of your class. You get your diploma mailed to you, but you wouldn't be able to do this. So I got another unsatisfactory from my analytical geometry teacher, who had this trait where whenever he said a word with an S, the S came out like a whistle. There was a guy on the old Ed Sullivan show who used to do this as a routine, but this guy did. He had a little space between his teeth. And I did great impersonations of all kinds of people. And in fact, I impersonated our chemistry teacher at our senior breakfast, which is kind of a big assembly for all the seniors. And I did a great impersonation of him, and our principal, who was Jim Tunney, the former NFL referee, for those of you sports fans. Jim Tunney came over to me and he put his arm around me and he said, "You did a great job this morning, Zev." And I said, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Tunney, I appreciate that." And then 10 weeks later, I get two unsatisfactories, one from the social studies teacher and one from my geometry teacher, who, and I deserved that one, because I used to impersonate him, in his presence. It was really, how stupid could I be, right? And then I got hauled into the principal's office, and Tunney sitting there with the boys' vice principal and some other teacher, like a tribunal, and he starts giving me a hard time and says, "You know what the rules are, and you know what the policy that the school district is?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, do you want to graduate on stage?" I said, "Well, it really doesn't matter to me, but it probably mattered to my dad." And this is like 8 years after my mom died. I said, and he's been through a lot of tragedy in the last decade, so probably mean a lot to him. And so Tunney, I say in the book, it was a great line. I have to give myself a little pat on the back for this. He says, Tunney, who as a referee never reversed a call, reversed the call on my graduating on stage, which, but I wasn't, you know, once you wound me up, I get going. But to just walk into a place and be gregarious, that wasn't me. But I made it nonetheless.
Did all right. So late 60s at UCLA, and you're off to the Soviet Union for the first time. As Zev, nobody goes to the Soviet Union in 1968. We're talking Vietnam, Iron Curtain. Why in the world did you go there?
So I got, my dad had two sisters who lived in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, which has been in the news a lot in this Ukrainian war. And I had a grandmother who lived in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. And you'll read about my grandmother in the chapter about my grandfathers. I'm not going to say any more than that. It's a very sad story in a lot of ways. But when I had my bar mitzvah in 1961, we were flooded with telegrams from all my dad's friends in New York and Cleveland and Chicago cousins and all this. And we get a telegram from my dad's sisters in Kharkiv. And it said, very simply, it says, congratulations on your birthday. Now, every other telegram we got was congratulations on your bar mitzvah, mazel tov on your bar mitzvah, blah, blah, blah. This one didn't say bar mitzvah, it just said congratulations on your birthday. So I asked my dad, what's with happy birthday? And he says, well, you got to understand that if they had put bar mitzvah in there, a Hebrew word, the Soviets were creating a cultural genocide, really, on a lot of ethnic groups, but really more on the Jews than any. It's a 1,000-year problem over there. He said if they had put bar mitzvah in there, first of all, the telegram probably would have never been cleared to be sent, and secondly, if they might have punished them. They might have, had a visit from the KGB. They might have been fined or fired from their job. It could have been anything. So, happy birthday would have to do. And as a 13-year-old, that kind of registered with me, and I started asking questions about why and what was going on. And all my friends have their aunts living here. Why are my aunts there? And they can't even come for a visit. They can't get out. They can't even say bar mitzvah. And so I got involved in the issue of freedom of emigration for Soviet Jews. And by the time I was in high school, late in high school, and certainly by the time I got to UCLA, I was writing articles for the Daily Bruin about the Soviet Jewry issue. I'd organized demonstrations about on behalf of Soviet Jews. And in my first full summer of 1968, I was a sophomore in college. I decided I wanted to go visit the Soviet Union. First of all, to see my aunts. My grandmother had died already. And my dad went too, but we didn't go together. We met for half the trip. We met in Kharkiv, where I met with my grandmother. But we met with my aunt. My aunt met me in Moscow, and she was kind of my tour guide. She took me around. She took me here and there, and she took me to Red Square. And we're standing in Red Square, and I asked her the question, how's life in the USSR for Jews? And she put her finger to her lips and she says, shh, the walls have ears. And I never heard that phrase before. And I'm looking around and I say, what walls? They're 100 yards away. There's a pretty big square. And but I realized if she was uncomfortable or paranoid about talking about something like that in the wide open spaces, that's really all I needed to know. And when we went down to Kharkiv, and my uncle, my aunt's husband, to give you an idea what life for Soviet Jews was, the Jewish population of Kharkiv was close to 100,000 when I went there in 1968. They had 0 synagogues, 0. By the way, there was 1 synagogue in Moscow for I don't know how many 100,000s of Jews there. There are more than 50 synagogues between La Brea and La Cienega in my neighborhood. And so we go, it was Friday night, it's a Sabbath. My aunt blew through her monthly budget and made one of these sumptuous meals. And but my uncle wasn't there, and I said, "Where's Uncle Miron?" And he says, "He's at a meeting." And later, when my dad and I were going back to the hotel, he said he wasn't at a meeting. He was at a private a private prayer service. It's called a minyan. And a minyan is the Hebrew word for a quorum. You need 10, in the old days, it was 10 men. You couldn't pray, you couldn't conduct a service unless you had 10 Jewish men. And it's an act of, what do you call it, a mitzvah, an act of righteousness when somebody asks you if you would be willing to make up, the 10th person or the 9th person at a minyan. It's a big deal. So he used to go every Friday night to a minyan to usher in the Sabbath. And that was the code word in the room, which of course they thought their room was their apartment, which was one room, that they were being listened to, that they were being monitored. And so I got all of this stuff just riled me up. And when I got back in 1968, I formed an organization at UCLA, California Students for Soviet Jews. We created a bunch of we recruited people to create their own at UC Davis, at Berkeley, at San Francisco State. Couldn't get anybody at SC. Yeah, maybe I didn't try hard enough. But and the rest, as they say, is history. I became an activist, part of a national movement in the United States, and really an international movement, because a lot of the Western European communities, which had Jewish communities, Jewish student communities, we kind of organized together. And that's what I did from my college days right until I got elected to the city council.
Your desire to fight anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union manifests itself in a joke that's in the book, and I'll tell it. It's kind of macabre, but I'll tell it anyway. That two Jews up against the wall during the Holocaust, facing the Nazi firing squad, and the first Jew begins angrily cursing the killers, yelling, cursing them. And the second one, he goes, "Hush, you're going to get us in trouble." Because, Jews being quiet in the face of the most extreme anti-Semitism, and that wasn't you. You were quite the activist at UCLA. And I want you to tell a story about the great toilet plunger caper. What the heck is that?
Why is that the most popular thing in the book? I don't know.
Toilet plunger caper.
So my commitment to myself was that no Russian's going to come into this town, if I knew about it, without being greeted appropriately to Los Angeles. We never called for a boycott. We never did any of that stuff, but we wanted to make sure that when there was a Soviet ballet or a Soviet orchestra or a ship, that we'd have a picket line, an informational picket line, because every time the Russians came out here with anybody, they were accompanied by a KGB escort, because they were afraid that these folks, once they got here, they'd defect, because there were no McDonald's in Russia at the time. This is a real problem. That's why they never allowed their performers to come out with their family or anything. So they always had a KGB escort, and we figured and the KGB escort would have to report everything back to headquarters when they saw this. So here comes the LA Times, when it was a newspaper, and actually had pages in it. Every day had a thing in the business section that showed all the ships that were coming in and docking at LA and Long Beach Harbor every day. And I'd look at it every day. And one day it said the Pskov, Russian ship coming from Vladivostok. I rounded up a few of my student colleagues, and we went down to the Long Beach, to San Pedro, to Port Sakal, rented a dinghy. Took us 2 hours to putt over to Long Beach Harbor, where this thing was docked, and we were going to spray paint on the side of the hull, let my people go. And a friend of mine, Cy Frumkin, who's one of my closest friends, said, "Hey, you're going to need to get a couple of toilet plungers." And I said, "Beg your pardon, toilet plungers for what?" He says, "You will never be able to get right up against the ship because the wake will keep pushing you back as it runs up against the ship. So what you should do is take 2 toilet plungers, 2 of you, one each of you three, 2 should take a plunger and attach it. Get a long plunger, attach it to the side of the hull, and then you spray paint the thing." And so we did, and we took a picture of it. I had a camera with me, And but there was a guy on one of the crew members of the ship who was up on top. It was a freighter, and he was looking over the hull, and the hull is concave, so I couldn't see him while we were up against the thing. But I knew he was up there, and I was afraid they were going to throw something down and sink us. So I started to spray paint very quickly, and I have a picture of it. We took the picture, we gave it to the LA Times, and they printed it. And the caption was "Naval Assault" on a Russian ship. And yeah, those were some of the fun things that I did.
In 74, it gets serious, and Zev grows up, finally. Ed Edelman, city council member, decides to run for this board of supervisors. He wins a seat. That leaves a council vacancy. Zev decides to run. I think chapter 6 is Why Zev? So talk to us about that first big campaign. I think you said they talked while I walked. Was that your strategy?
Well, I wouldn't call it a strategy. It was the only thing I could do. I had no money. You know, I raised $27,000 in the primary. 6,000 of it were loans, what we called winner's loans in those days. If you win, you pay me back. If you lose, I'll just write it off. One of those loans for $1,000 was from John's mother, my mother-in-law, and by the way, when the election was over and I won, the first call I got was from my opponent. The second call I got was from Tom Bradley. The third call I got was from Ruth Edelston saying, "I want to talk to you about the $1,000." And I said, "Believe me, you're going to be the first one, you know, to get paid back." And so it was. Yeah, the campaign was. To say it was improbable is the understatement. Barbara and I talked about it. I worked on the McGovern for President campaign in 1972, and that was my first taste of really organized politics, and I kind of liked it. And some of the people, when Edelman looked like he was a shoo-in to win the supervisor's race, which he was, and he did win it, the people I worked with in the McGovern campaign started coming to me and said, "You know, you should think of running for that seat." And I said, "I can't run. I don't even know the first thing about running." And then I started thinking about it and talked to Barbara about it. You know, we had enough money saved up that I could quit my job and with the Council for Soviet Jews, which is what I was doing for a couple of years after the McGovern campaign. And you know, she was working at UCLA, and we didn't have any kids, so we could make this work. And the rest, as they say, is history. I mean, I ran against one very prominent person was Roz Wyman. She was a former councilwoman in that seat. She had been defeated by Ed Edelman in 1965, and she was trying to make a comeback. And she was working for Tom Bradley at the time, mayor of Los Angeles at the time. The other person who I was running against was Tom Bradley's choice, which was his administrative assistant, a woman by the name of Fran Savage. Ironically, both of them just passed away in this last year, just a couple months apart. And I became good friends with both of them, more with Roz than with Fran, because Fran moved out of town after a while. But you know, so I had two opponents who were extraordinarily well funded. Fran Savage raised $67,000 to my $27,000. And Roz raised something like $70,000, and she didn't spend $39,000 of it because she was certain she was going to be in the runoff. And her polling showed that, and Fran's polling showed that Roz was going to come in first. So what Fran did with her $67,000 was pound the heck out of Roz, just resurrected all the issues that Edelman used to beat her 10 years earlier. And Roz, thinking she was a shoo-in for the runoff, saved her money for the runoff. In those days, you could save your primary money for the general, and that cost her to come in third place, because Fran had so depressed Roz's vote that she went from what the polls showed at 38% down to 18%. And I was walking door to door. That's every day, 7 days a week, rain or shine. And it happened to be a wet winter. And I figured out, first of all, when it's raining, everybody's home. Somebody's home. And if you come to somebody's door as a candidate, a little free advice here, and it's raining, they will never forget you. They probably won't forget you if you come to the door anyway. But if you come in a rainstorm, they figure you must really want this job. And I remember the one day, it was in March of '75 in the primary. I was walking up Motor Avenue in Cheviot Hills, and it was raining. It was also it was a Saturday. It was the day that UCLA was playing, I think it was Louisville, either Louisville or Kentucky, I forget which. It was John Wooden's last game, and UCLA won the national championship at that time. And I'm walking door to door, and every time I'd knock, everybody in West LA is watching this game. Everybody in Southern California was. And every time when somebody opened the door, I said, "What's the score?" You know, well, we're up by 5. Okay. Finally, it's like 2 minutes to go. It was a close game, and I asked this guy, here's my stuff. Hope you'll vote for me. He says, "Oh yeah, I'll vote for you. I've seen your literature." I said, "Well, since you're so nice, would you mind if I come in and just watch the last couple of minutes of the game?" Well, that guy put up a lawn sign. He voted for me 10 times. It was a really, really a grassroots election campaign, and not because of any strategy, but because it's the only way I could communicate. And I walked to about 25% of the precincts in that district, and there are a lot of precincts in that district. In Agoura Hills, you can walk every precinct in a couple of months. But for me, 6 months, but I'll tell you, at the end of the 6 months, I had people saying, "Hey, listen, you came to my door, I saw you at the bowling alley, you gave me your bottle top and your propaganda in the supermarket, I'm voting for you. Just leave me alone." So you get the sense, if you're running and you're out among the people, you get a sense whether there's momentum building or not. I just didn't know how much there was. But in the primary, I beat Roz by 119 votes. Fran got 33%, I got 19%, and Roz got 18%. And if Roz had spent her $39,000, I'd be a retired accountant or something. It's that, so sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. But it was a great campaign, and
But you're out of the frying pan into the fire, because on the council you're up against LAPD, and notorious LAPD was back then for its treatment of the LGBTQ community. And powerful police chief Ed Davis was a notorious gay basher, I guess is the only way to say it. And you fought early in your career for minority rights and became one of the first straight LA politicians to oppose Prop 6, which was a state initiative that would have banned gay teachers from becoming public school teachers, if you can believe that. You spoke out as an advocate of city benefits for same-sex domestic partners. So talk about your philosophy back then toward diversity and those rights.
I'd like to tell you it's a great philosophy. Part of my philosophy was framed by, I was a believer in human rights, right? I mean, you can't be for free immigration for Soviet Jews and then not be for human rights here at home. And in the Vietnam War and civil rights, remember this, my ideas and my values were first and foremost formed in my home, but secondly by the environment that was going around. In the 1960s, idealism and political activism was the order of the day. Secondly, I grew up in the Fairfax area. Well, after we moved from Boyle Heights, I was 8 years old when we moved out of Boyle Heights, and we moved to the Fairfax area. I lived 2 blocks from the city border of West Hollywood. And West Hollywood was very gay, as it is now, but it was a very gay community. And the park that I used to go to, which was 2 blocks from my house, and I used to play basketball and baseball there, they used to have a lesbian softball league up there, and I'd play with them. I mean, I didn't play on their team, but I played around with them. I threw the ball, batting practice, or whatever. These were not lesbians to me. I knew they were lesbians, but they were people. They were good athletes. They got a great rise ball and a good sinker. And it's just, I grew up. My best friend growing up, who lived 2 doors from my house, had cerebral palsy, and the first time I met him, it was weird. The second time I met him, it was in the rearview mirror. I mean, we played ball together. We did all kinds of stuff together. And I never realized, after the first day I met him, I never recognized his disability. I just worked with it. And so it's just, these things happen in life where what you're exposed to and how you react to it and what you're taught at home frames that. So when I got to the city council, let me back up a second. I asked my students, my grad students who are going into the public service business, not necessarily as politicians, but as staffers or whatever, and I say to them, if you're going to go into this business, I want you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what is the issue that you would be willing to lose your job over? Because if you can't answer that question, then you're going to be a tool of some special interest, some stakeholder. You're not going to be the master of your own identity or what have you. So my students, of course, the next question they ask, they go to UCLA, so they're pretty smart. They say, well, what was your red line? You know, what was the issue you wouldn't, that you would be willing to lose your job over? I said, the Bill of Rights. You know, because I'm sworn to uphold the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, of which the Bill of Rights is a part. And but that's what I'm willing to do. That's why on the Christian cross was very controversial. We polled it 2-1. People in my supervisorial district wanted to keep the cross on the county seal. I polled it because I just wanted to, not because I was going to change my mind, but because I wanted to find out whether it's time for me to go to the retirement office and start filling out my retirement papers, because I wouldn't win the next election. But it was never a question that I would violate my oath of office. And it's a tough thing, because the Bill of Rights is designed to protect the minority against the tyranny of the majority. The majority can usually take care of themselves, but the Bill of Rights says minorities have rights too. And the minority opinion has rights too. And that's kind of counterintuitive to a politician, because politicians like to have the majority on their side. And you alienate the majority enough times and you won't get reelected. But that's the threshold question you have to ask yourself. At some point, you're going to be confronted with an issue which could cost you your election. And I'm not a Mike Pence fan, but Mike Pence did the right thing, and he's paying the price for it now. And there are thousands and thousands of public officials who do those kinds of things, who go against the majority because they know, number one, that to do otherwise would violate the Constitution, and for another reason, it's the right thing to do. So when I walk into the city council, Ed Davis, who I got along with pretty well, despite his craziness, he wasn't really crazy, as I learned over time. It was a show for him. You know, he said, hang him at the airport. He was the chief of police back in the 70s. And he would say about hijackers, he says, hang him at the airport. Try him and hang him at the airport. And on gays and lesbians, he said, he was asked whether he would put a recruitment mobile at the West Hollywood Gay Pride Parade, to recruit people to come into the police department. He says, no, I'm going to put a recruitment mobile out there for conversion from gays, for people to convert from homosexuality to heterosexuality, which was about the dumbest thing anybody could say. But he didn't believe it. You know, at the end of the day, Ed Davis was the deciding vote in the state legislature for the Gay Bill of Rights. He represented you out here, I think. He was in the West Valley and in eastern Ventura County. He was a very intellectual guy. He read books, he read biographies. When I first got there, he says, you remind me of Theodore Roosevelt, your mustache. I said, well, you'd know, Ed, you met him. You're old enough to have met him. So, but I took him on. I took him on over police spying. The police department, LAPD, had a unit called the Public Disorder and Intelligence Division, which had absolutely nothing to do with public disorder. It was a monitoring division, a division of cops who monitored people who had a political point of view that differed from the chief of police.
Let me interrupt, because you had fears that they had eyes on you and Barbara, surveillance for, God forbid, being socialists. No, they didn't think we were socialists. And they never had Barbara on their side.
She didn't have the privilege of being on the list of people that had files on them. I was, and my buddy Cy Frumkin was, and a lot of people. John Mack, the head of the Urban League, the priest who was the Episcopal priest at the All Saints Episcopal Church in Pasadena was on there. Tom Bradley was on there. Tom Bradley's police commissioners were on there. It was a list of 200 people that was found in a discovery motion by the ACLU when they sued the city over this. Yeah, so it was, but I took them on, and I was advised, by the way, by my supporters and by my staff, don't do this. The police department has a way of getting back at you. The reason they had me on their list was because I ran this California Students for Soviet Jews. And honestly, they had two cops who were kind of our liaison to the police department that were probably working for the PDID, and we were buddies. You know, we told them, yeah, we're going to demonstrate at the ship in Long Beach, and here's what we're going to do. We weren't any threat to the public order. But here's the one that really got to me. When I was a student at UCLA, my senior year, maybe even my graduate, when I was in graduate school, there was a professor by the name of Hayden White who taught historiography. And it was I think it was 1972. It was Vietnam moratorium. You know, we had invaded Cambodia, and the whole campus was in turmoil. Campuses all over the country were in turmoil. And Hayden White, there was a undercover police officer, a sergeant, who infiltrated his class, posing as a student, to monitor him. Monitor him for what? I hope he learned something about historiography. The guy never talked about politics in the classroom. It's not like today where teachers just jettison their syllabus and talk about whatever they want to talk about. But he, you know, he was a great professor. But somehow he found out that this guy was an undercover agent, and he confronted him along with one other professor out right in front of Haynes Hall. Fran, you went to UCLA, right? Is Fran still here? Yeah. Did you go to UCLA?
No, but I represented UCLA.
You represented UCLA, and you're a Bruin, I know that. But so I thought maybe you'd know Haynes Hall. Haynes Hall is one of the original buildings there, and they confronted him on, and he panicked. The cop panicked, got into his car, his unmarked car, which was parked in the most prestigious parking place you can get. So clearly the administration knew that he was there. And he turned on his engine, he floored it, and he knocked one of the professors, kind of grazed him. He fell onto the curb. Jeffrey Simcox was his name. And there was a lawsuit. And the lawsuit was, as you might imagine from the ACLU, was from A to Z. I had come to the LA City Council in 1975, and one of the first items on the agenda in my first year, one of the first things that came up was the settlement of the case, Hayden White versus the city of Los Angeles. And I thought, boy, there must be a God, because this was connecting the dots, the powers that be connecting the dots. That's the kind of stuff they were doing, and I took them on. And I said, when I was advised not to do it, I said, after you've played hide and seek with the KGB in Kharkiv and in Moscow and in Kiev, the LAPD is a walk in the park. And then it got worse. There were the issue of excessive use of force, the chokehold. We banned the chokehold in the city of LA in 1982. There was a string of the people who got choked out were always people of color. They never choked out a white person. I mean, unless they were crazy. But just as a routine, they used to choke out people of color, and particularly blacks. And there were 17 people who had died as a result of the chokehold in a span of 15, 18 months, something like that, 1981, 82. And it became a big deal. And we had no cameras in those days, right? We had 17 cases like George Floyd, where the cops got their testosterone going, they'd cut off the blood to the brain, they wouldn't let go, and the people would die. And I took.
We didn't know about it.
Well, the public didn't know about it, but we knew about it because we were getting the complaints and we were getting the lawsuits. And by the way, it cost the taxpayers a lot of money every time we had to settle one of those lawsuits, because we never took it to court, because we had no defense. And I shouldn't say never took it to court. We took it to court. We lost some. But on a death case, it's we shouldn't have been using, the sheriff wasn't using the chokehold in those days. That wasn't in their quiver. That wasn't an arrow in their quiver, but the LAPD was using it. And it was very dicey politically. You know, the LAPD was the most powerful political force in the city, in city government. Ed Davis was once asked whether he would ever consider running for mayor. And he said, why would I do that? I have a more powerful job where I am. And he was right.
Let's talk about Board of Supervisors, 94. Ed Edelman announces he's not running for the city council. He's done. Perfect opening for Zev Yaroslavsky. So there's your opening for the Board of Supervisors. Your wife, Barbara, at that time, thinks, he's going to join the supervisors. That leaves the city council seat opening. So Barbara thinks about running for city council, and the media really picks up on it. He's skewered in the press. You've got the Board of Supervisors and city council sleeping in the same bed together, God forbid. So Barbara was trounced in the election. What happened with her in that?
Well, she was trounced, and I knew she was going to get trounced, not because she wasn't a good candidate. She was a great candidate. It would have been a great councilwoman. She was up against a very accomplished and decent candidate. Turned out to be Mike Fuhrer, who became the city attorney later on, was in the state legislature. But it wasn't about her versus him. It was about what you said. I think it's my quote, that people did not want their supervisor and their councilman sleeping in the same bed. It's too much power. It didn't sit well with me. And the trouble was that I couldn't say that to her. Because it was her decision to make. And, I had my way of just kind of think about the pros and the cons, and, kind of like a lawyer on the one hand, on the other hand. And, but at the end of the day, it was her decision, and I wasn't going to tell her not to do it. Because, number one, it is her decision. And if she did something that went against what she really wanted to do, she probably wouldn't have held it against me, but most people would hold it against somebody. I'll never know whether I would have been, president of the United States. And she got clobbered in the primary, and then gets into the runoff with Mike Fuhrer, who's an outstanding orator. And Barbara was not an outstanding orator. She was no Winston Churchill in terms of oratory, but she was very much a Winston Churchill type when it came to interpersonal relationships. But when you're in front of a candidates forum, you're not having a conversation with people, a one-on-one. And but I'll tell you this, that it changed. It was the best thing that ever happened to her that she ran. It would have been better if she had won, but as a result of that election, she became a very decent public speaker. She could hold her own, and she did hold her own against Mike Fuhrer in the debates in the general election, in the runoff. It didn't matter because the election was over in the primary, basically. And what happened was she got recognized by a lot of people who, outside of my world, my circle, and even her circle, in the civic circle, and then she started getting asked to serve on commissions and this, that, and the other thing. And the Speaker of the Assembly at the time, I think it was Herb Wesson, I'll never understand why he did this, asked her if he had an appointment to the California Medical Board, and he appointed her to the medical board. And she was the first non-medical doctor to chair the medical board. She chaired it for 3 years. She was on it for 13 years. And she was an outstanding member of that board. And I'll tell you, the state got their money's worth out of her. They don't pay them. You pay for your airfare and $100 a meeting. She was up all night because she had bad knees, and she would wake up in the middle of the night. She'd be reading cases in the medical board. So she became an incredibly important, in her world, important public servant. And as I said when she died, I never understood how she kept expanding the circle of people in her orbit. There are just more and more people, and it's kind of like adding more memory to your computer. You just keep adding more memory. She had more people on her, mental speed dial than anybody I know. And you whatever you wanted match up your kid with, for marriage, your son with your daughter or son with your son. She knew somebody who was single. That's how my daughter got married to her husband. Her husband's mother and Barbara were in the same mahjong group, and both of them had just broken up with their significant others, and so the two connected them. The odds that my daughter would ever go out with somebody that her mother recommended were zero, but she did. And I said, there's a story I tell, I said this at her funeral too. There was when Larry King had his program, he had Bob Strauss on it. Bob Strauss was a former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union under Jimmy Carter. He was chairman of the Democratic National Committee. He was one of the most prominent lobbyists and influencers in Washington. And he said, Larry King says to Bob Strauss, he says, Bob was a Texan. He says, Bob, describe Bob Strauss to the American people. And Strauss said, well, Larry, more people know the Pope than know Bob Strauss. But Bob Strauss knows more people than the Pope does. And that's what Barbara was. More people knew me than knew her, but she knew more people than I did. I mean, she could sit at a banquet and say, that guy's having an affair with that woman.
Zev, we're gonna open it up to the floor here in a little bit, but a couple things I wanted to touch on, just to kind of open the door. The Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area was formed in 1978. And you've always said you're a staunch supporter of requiring open space out here, and enter the famous North Area Plan, which always kind of confounded me because the supervisors had rules and regulations in place for a long time protecting open spaces and resolutions governing growth and all that good stuff, but they routinely changed those policies, ignored those protections, hence the expansion out here in the Conejo Valley that we've seen, Conejo, Las Virgenes valleys. So how did the North Area Plan change all that?
So when I got to the Board of Supervisors in December of 1994, I remember Mike Antonovich used to represent this area. Ed Edelman represented it for a relatively short period of time, but before that, forever, Mike Antonovich represented it. Mike Antonovich never met a developer he didn't like. And that's why you have Agoura Hills, and that's why you have Calabasas, especially Calabasas. They took this area and they leveled it. And when I got to the board, I saw right away that the culture in the county regional planning department was that they assumed that I was, in the pocket of developers, or that whatever the developer wants, I will bless, just like Mike Antonovich did. And we didn't realize that at first, because at the city in those days, not now, but in those days, the city had a very rigorous planning department and some great planning directors, and they had a plan, they stuck to the plan. But out here, the plan didn't mean anything. If there was a plan, it didn't mean anything. It was kind of a suggestion, and we'll give you a variance, we'll change the plan, and do all these kinds of things. And so there's a culture in the county bureaucracy, planning bureaucracy, that the developer ran the show. And so we had to educate, let me put it gently, we had to educate the planning department that there's a new sheriff in town, and we're going to have a plan. And when we get the plan done, it's going to be a very rigorous plan, and you're going to stick to it. It's not just a suggestion. They used to say about Cairo, the traffic signals, if you've ever been to Cairo, the worst traffic mess in the world, other than Bangkok. They said the traffic signals in Cairo are not a law, they're a suggestion. You can choose to run the red light if you want, if you think you can make it through. That's what it was out here. It was the wild, wild west. And it took me a few years to get it done. The North Area Plan was the first canary in the coal mine, and it was the first change in the direction of that battleship. And when they started to realize that I mean business, and my staff meant business. And so the North Area Plan had things in it, like limited grading, ridgeline development prohibitions. And the developers just didn't know. They must have thought I was joking, because nobody wants to build below the ridgeline if they can afford to build above the ridgeline. There were homes on the ridgelines of the Santa Monica Mountains that could be seen with the naked eye from the space shuttle. And I'm sorry, you know, as somebody said, one of the enviros from my city days said, God isn't making mountains anymore. I actually made a developer who sawed off a ridgeline in Bel Air in violation of his subdivision track map. And then neighbors who could see it from the next ridge over said, hey, they're grading in violation of the agreement we made, they're grading the thing. And I called the developer up. He was a supporter of mine. And very active in the community, and philanthropic and all that. And I called him up and I said, are you grading the ridge line? My constituents say they can see the bulldozers grading the ground. Yeah, just a little bit. I said, excuse my French, bullshit. You're not supposed to grade 1 inch. And I sent the building department out there to issue a stop order. And then we made him put most of the ridge line back. He couldn't put the actual ridge because it just couldn't, structurally. But I cost him a pretty penny doing that. And I reminded people out here, including developers, hey, I made so-and-so, and I won't mention his name, I made so-and-so restore the bulk of a ridge line he illegally graded. You know, I'll make you do the same thing. We had battles with the city of Calabasas, who wanted to create a big hotel and country club and all that over right across from the King Gillette Ranch property on Mulholland and Las Virgenes. And you know, I got involved in that. Fran got involved in that. By the way, you know, all of your elected officials are great, and they were always great to work with. But Fran is in a league of her own, beyond Agoura Hills and the Santa Monica Mountains. But she was just a great partner. And Fran and Sheila Kuehl and I decided we'd endorse a candidate in the election in Calabasas, and we just crushed them. And it kind of sent a message to Calabasas, because they have been kind of on the more, in the past, a little more pro-development than most of us would have liked. But this was the canary in the coal mine, the one that I really loved, and the most significant land use accomplishment in my life, in my career, and I had a bunch of issues that I had to deal with, was the Santa Monica Mountains local coastal plan, which is a chapter in the book. It's thank you. It's a great chapter in the book if you're really wonky. I made it as accessible as possible so that you don't get into the weeds. I had one of my colleagues, a professor, read an early manuscript of the book, and he read it and he said he loved it, and he's making notes, you know, and then he gets to the chapter on the Santa Monica Mountains. He says, this is where I'm starting to skip. So I realized it was probably a little long, but it's not now, and it really is how the sausage is made in the best way. We ended up, I had 2 years left in my career, and Peter Douglas, who was the Coastal Commission Executive Director, who I did not always get along with, because I thought he was wrong. I know he was wrong. He wanted to declare every square inch of the Santa Monica Mountains local coastal area, the coastal zone area, as ecologically sensitive habitat area, ESHA, which was preposterous. Pepperdine University is not ESHA. It might have been before they built the university, which was way before my time, but it's not ESHA. There are a lot of properties. The golf course, the Malibu Country Club, is not ESHA. So why are you just putting one big broad brush on the Santa Monica Mountains? They did it to Malibu, and they got away with it because Malibu was not strong enough to stand up to them. Neither was I strong enough to stand up to them, because I told them, I said, I'm willing to put 0 development rights on stuff that is really, let's survey all the Santa Monica Mountains and see what is ESHA, and then we'll ban development on it. And it would be most of the Santa Monicas, most of the undeveloped Santa Monicas. But if you own a piece of property that has already been graded, why are you doing that? So that you can shake them down for a donation to your, Coastal Commission Environmental Protection Fund, which is how he operated. And he said, if you send me a plan like that, it's dead on arrival. And so I said, fine. That was in the mid-2000s, the aughts, in 2000. And so I said, I'll leave it to my successor to worry about it. Then, sadly, Peter died after a long battle with cancer in 2012, I think it was. And I made a beeline for his successor. And Lester, what was it, Chuck Lester? Charles Lester? Yeah, Charles. And he was his number 2 guy. And I had a meeting with him and our planning director and my deputy out in Marina Del Rey, and I said, listen, here's the deal. I got 2 years left. I'm willing to spend all of my political capital to get this thing done. It's one of the only 2 pieces of the California coast that does not have a plan, a coastal plan. And I know why. It's very complicated, multiple stakeholders, the whole 9 yards. And the Coastal Commission executive director wanted to do crazy things, or didn't want us to do anything. So it became a mishmash of stuff. But I'm willing to spend all of my political capital my last 2 years. But the only condition I have is that we don't declare everything ESHA, because philosophically I just think it's dishonest. And I'm prepared to survey everything. We'll declare whatever is declared ESHA by the scientists. We'll prohibit development. He says, well, if you prohibit development, we can't do that because it's a taking. Most of you folks know what a taking is, right? You got to let somebody who owns a piece of property get some value out of the property. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put $2 million in a fund, in a trust fund, so that if we ever get to a point where there's a piece of property that somebody wants to develop as ESHA, and we have downzoned it to 0, we'll be able to buy it from them. So he said, let me think about it. And he saw I was serious. He knew what we had done on the North Area Plan. He knew my record. And he called me about a week or 2 later, and he said, all right, I'm willing to give it a shot. And that was a breakthrough. And for 2 solid years, we dealt with every conceivable stakeholder, the horse owners. Oh God, Ruth Gerson, is she still around? Ruth, I love Ruth. She was the toughest person to negotiate with that I.
And you said that if she would go ahead and back you as an equestrian on the local coastal plan, you'd get up on one of her horses and ride. How did that ride go? Did it happen?
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, she said she was back and forth. She promised me she would be for it, and then, you know, the fax machine wasn't working, so she couldn't send me. I needed her support because I needed Don Kanabe's vote on the Board of Supervisors, and Don Kanabe listened to the equestrians, as did a couple of other members of the board. So I was trying to piece it all together, but if she didn't support it, it would give Don a reason not to vote for it. And spoiler alert, Don gave me the 3rd vote on this. He's in my Hall of Fame forever for that, because if he hadn't have done it, all this would be nothing. And so Ruth finally, I said, Ruth, I called her up, I said, either you know what or get off the pot. I need a letter from you, and I need it now. And if your fax machine is broken, I'll drive out there myself and I'll pick it up. She says, all right, I'll send it to you. But I want one thing in return. When we have our annual horse riding event out in wherever it was, out here, in Canaan Doom Road, I think, she says, I want you to ride a horse. Now, I said I would. And what you need to know is that I was thrown by a horse when I was about 7 years old, and I didn't like getting on a horse. It's not my thing. But for the environment, I'd do anything, right? So I got on a horse, and everything was fine until the horse took his first step, and I got a little panicky, and I said, all right, I've ridden the horse. Promises made, promises kept, and I got off the horse. And I've got a great picture of me on a horse. It didn't make the cut for the book, but it was a great achievement, and it's what happens. It's the good part of government when you have stakeholders who negotiate hard and who work hard, but are willing to compromise. And I had everybody compromising. Heal the Bay wanted to ban all the vineyards. I did not want to ban all the vineyards. I love a glass of Chardonnay or Cabernet once in a while. But I also knew that the vineyards did some environmental damage to the area, and I also knew that unless I had Heal the Bay on my side, I wouldn't get a Coastal Commission majority to vote for the plan. So that, I'll throw the future vineyards under the bus. Not a problem for me. And I had to get the horse owners to agree to some restitution of the environmental damage they had done by not collecting all the horse manure and stuff, and the Coastal Commission wanted to slam them with retroactive fines and to do to just go crazy and to do things that no horse owner in the Santa Monica Mountains could afford. And I begged the Coastal Commission to understand that you'll get no plan at all if you don't do this. Anyway, but it went back and forth. Everybody gave. Heel of the Bay gave a little on the horse manure. That was their issue. I gave them the ban on the vineyards. There were 1,000 other issues, and to say that it was like cutting the Gordian knot would be an understatement. And in August of 2014, the thing passed. Late August, it passed on a 3-1 vote. Mark Ridley Thomas excused himself from that meeting. I'll just leave it at that. And we got the votes, and so future generations will now have an opportunity to enjoy this thing. And I tell you, you live in one of the great areas in urban America. I mean, this is just a spectacular place. I always loved it. I had a cousin who lived in Woodland Hills before it was Woodland Hills. We used to go out there and look for rattlesnakes. And as a councilman, and certainly as a supervisor, but as a councilman, I became a student of the Santa Monicas. I had some really good mentors, Marvin Browdy, Tony Bielenson. And so when I finally, I quote Lyndon Johnson. Johnson, when he gave the speech in 1965 after the Selma March, he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I never dreamt that I'd have the power to do an act of Voting Rights Act. It was what the issue was all about. He said, never dreamt that I have the power to make these important changes. Now I have the power, and I mean to use it. And that's kind of the way I felt when I got into the county. I had a lot of land use experience in the city, nothing like different kind of land use than out here. But I became kind of schooled in that field, and now the stakes were much higher here. These were huge swaths of land, tens of thousands of acres of land, which should be preserved for future generations. And I had the power to do something about it, and I meant to use it. Now, I didn't do it myself. I had people like Fran Pavley and Sheila Kuehl and Tony Bielenson, who were my partners. We didn't have all the money. We had the meeting that saved the King Gillette Ranch, took place in your field office. I remember it really well. I think I talked. Was it at Agoura Hills City Hall? I knew it had something to do with you. It was your property, so.
Around the Fran Pavley kitchen table. Yeah. The city of Agoura Hills formed around the Fran Pavley kitchen table. That kitchen table will be in the Agoura Hills City Hall of Fame somewhere someday because so much got done there.
It was like I described it as being like a United Jewish Appeal meeting. Okay, Joe, you gave $10,000 last year. What is it going to be this year? Fran Pavley is sitting around the table, and she says to the National Park Service, we need $1 million from you. County, what are you going to do? Calabasas, and it worked. So having these kinds of partnerships and building trust over a period of time allowed us to accomplish some big things.
350-page book talking about how local government can work. And before we release you back into retirement and maybe get a few questions from the audience, let me ask you on the national level, Zev, what does it take to get it done nationally? So divisive right now, and left and right and center and up and down. Any parting words for how to get things done nationally?
I mean, I don't have an answer for it, and I tell you what the causes of it are, and part of it is political corruption, and I don't mean bags of cash. I mean drawing lines for congressional seats that ensure that Republicans can only win that seat and Democrats can only win that seat. So what you end up having is the election is really carried out in the primary. And in order to win the primary so that you can become the Republican nominee in a Republican district, you have to tack as far to the right as possible. And it's the same on it's not I don't want to paint it with all the broad brush on either side of the aisle, but on the left side, you have people who are a little more farther to the left than the center. I have a quote from Blaise Pascal in the book that I tripped over a while back. I said, wow, this kind of describes my philosophy of the political spectrum. He said, he was a 17th century French mathematician, and he said, greatness doesn't come from having 1 foot in each extreme. one foot, both feet in one extreme. Greatness comes when you have 1 foot in each extreme and you occupy the space in between. You got to be able to negotiate and to compromise. Revolutions don't work out too well most of the time. So you got to bring people along. That's one thing that's missing. The other thing is I think that money, thanks to the Citizens United case, money has really corrupted the political process. Money is necessary, but it shouldn't be the only reason somebody gets elected. And it isn't really the only reason, but most of the time it is. My daughter-in-law, when she ran for the city council, which she got elected to last year, she was outspent 3-1. Most of that 3 was from independent expenditure campaigns from special interests who were trying to make a hostile takeover of the LA City Council. It's wrong. It's corrupting in a very real way. If you're a council person and you're up for re-election, do you want the special interests who fund IEs, independent expenditures, to support you with a big IE or support your next opponent with a big IE? And it's intimidating. I didn't have that kind of problem in my day. When you're a supervisor, it's hard to dislodge a supervisor unless they're bad. But at the city council, at a city council level, it's not that hard. And when somebody can put up $500,000 in a campaign, and you can only raise 50,000, then that's your campaign right there. And so when you get to the city council and they want to saw a ridge line off of a small town in the county, they'll do it because so that's part of it. And the last thing I'll say, and then we can get to the questions, is about what the and I'm not advocating that we have a nonpartisan national system, but I'll tell you the one thing about in the municipalities we don't run as Democrats or Republicans. The state constitution prohibits partisan designations and partisanship, not partisanship, but partisan designations when you run for city and county offices. And that makes a big difference. When we had our county health care crisis, which almost bankrupted the county, the first few months I was there, I walked down the hall and saw Mike Antonovich. I knew I had to get him because I had an idea of how to solve our fiscal crisis, but I knew that I had to get him because he was the most conservative on the board in order to pick up anybody else. If I couldn't get him, I wasn't going to get anybody. And or I wouldn't get 3, let's put it that way. And I walked down the hall, and he liked the idea. His chief of staff liked the idea, and we put it together, and we went to the other 3 members. Now, here's the thing. He didn't have to go to his Republican caucus to check and see whether he could do it. I didn't have to go to the Democratic caucus and see if I had permission to do it. Nobody had to say, well, if you give it to the Republican, they're going to take credit for it in the next election, or vice versa. It just 2 guys got together and said, this is the right thing to do to avert a bankruptcy. How long did it take the Republicans to find a speaker? How long is it going to take them to avert what do you call it, a shutdown, a government shutdown? Or this bozo from Alabama who's holding up hundreds and hundreds of promotions in the military, which is now a national security issue for us. And I'm not saying that Democrats don't have their problem children too, but this is a product of what I just described. It's all about social media and clicks and how much money you can raise online for some people on both sides of the aisle. And the partisan thing is a problem.
Round of applause for Zev Yaroslavsky, our guest tonight. Thank you for being with us. Nick, do you want to pass the mic around for just a couple seconds here, 1 or 2?
Go Bruins. So my question is, I've got 3 kids, ages 30 to 20. One's still in college. One's married, one's engaged. So my son just moved. He works on the People Mover project down at LAX. Has an engineering degree, great job. Between he and his fiance, they make $200,000 a year. They move into an apartment in Sherman Oaks, $3,000 a month, 2-bedroom. It's 50 years old, adequate. So, I live in Agora Hills, 25 years, would like to get them a little bit closer. And I heard you about 5 minutes ago saying that one of your favorite sayings or whatever is you don't want to have a foot in each extreme, you want to be in the middle. So Agora is, and I'm not making any type of statement against the Planning Commission or anything here, but Agora is a tough place to build. By the way, I'm a CPA. I'm not a developer. I don't own it. I own a house, and that's it. So how do you stay with both feet in the middle? I'm not saying build in the mountains. I'm not saying build on the coast. But there's some flatlands here, and Agora doesn't have a whole lot of land left. But they do have some flat land near here on Agora Road where there's apartment projects that are moving forward.
After all, I got a bachelor's in economics, not worth very much, but I have the right to say this. When I took my first economics course at UCLA, the professor drew a supply and demand curve on the blackboard, and he said, this represents perfect competition. If the price goes up, demand will go down. If the price goes down, if the supply goes down, the price will go, whatever, and you know what I mean. This is why it doesn't work, because I don't understand it. No, so he writes, he says, this is perfect competition. And then he turns to the class and he says, but there's one thing I need to tell you. There is no such thing as perfect competition. All right, and what do I mean by that? There are a lot of reasons why the price of housing is up, and I can't pretend to know all of them, but I know a few of them. One of them is the commoditization of real estate. Hedge funds buying, thousands and thousands of homes all over the city, jacking up the rents. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just call one of these hedge funds, say you want to invest in one of their real estate investments, and they'll send you the prospectus, and they'll tell you, here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy all these homes. We're going to evict all the people under the guise that we're going to renovate the homes, and we will renovate the homes. Then we're going to raise the rents sky high, and we're going to guarantee you an 8% return on your investment. This is when the CPI was 1%, 1.5%. And so what happens? When a house on my block goes for $500,000 when it's really only worth $200,000 or $400,000, all of a sudden that becomes the floor of what every other house is going to command. So the prices, this is not something new. This has been going on for several decades. The price has gone up. The only thing that'll bring the prices back down is a depression or a Great Recession. Property values went down 40%, close to 40% in the Great Recession 15 years ago. That's not a prescription for affordability. So and I was just talking to your mayor as we were walking in, the state legislature has passed several hundred bills by now in the last several years, hundreds of bills on housing. Nobody can tell you in the state, or your building or planning director here can't tell you how AB 123 relates to SB 757, because they're all contradicting each other. It's a total you-know-what. And so I believe there's a war against single-family homes in the state legislature. They're winning that battle. There's a war against, they've mandated that you can build 4 houses on a single-family lot anywhere in the state. So my single-family lot, your single-family lot, you can subdivide it if it's 5,000 feet or more, and you can build 4 units on that. You can build a duplex. It was called the duplex law. It was really the quadruplex law, plus the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units. You can build 3 of those. So you can actually put 7 units on a house, on a property that was zoned for 1 house, okay? And by the way, they've passed a few hundred bills. What's happened to the price of real estate and the price of housing? Even now, with interest rates sky high, my house is worth the same thing right now as it was 2 years ago, with the interest rates at 8%, the home mortgage rates. So something is screwy here. It's not just about supply, but what's happening is there are people who don't believe that single-family homes should be, especially in more affluent communities, should be around because of historical. I'm not even going to get into that, the issue, but they want to punish the single-family homeowner and say on that the rationale for that is that we can only create affordable housing if we allow homes, if we allow the zoning to change or allow developers to build apartment buildings in West Los Angeles or in Sherman Oaks or in Agora Hills. And there are places where you can build more. And God knows that the city of LA, that's my backyard, has more development going on there now than they have in a long time. And it isn't because of the legislature. It's more because of municipal ordinances that came out. But now the legislature has mandated or has permitted people to build monstrosities where they don't belong. We have it's a long answer. This is one of my wheelhouses, and I feel very strongly about it. We had a plan in the city of LA, which was not just for the city of LA. It was kind of took into account what went on in the region. It was called the Concept Los Angeles, or the Centers Concept. And it was Cal Hamilton, who was our city planning director. And his idea was there should be high density centers, there should be medium density centers, and there should be low density centers. It wasn't rocket science. He was really trying to figure out a modus vivendi of, let's acknowledge what the pattern of development has been in Southern California, and then let's embrace it and facilitate it. Now, what you have is legislators who and real estate developers who are funding those legislators, and hedge funds who are funding those legislators in a big way. The YIMBY movement, which is funded by Wall Street and by high tech, big time. They want everything to be a center. Well, you can't have everything be a center. Then you're going to look like Sao Paulo, Brazil. If you've ever flown over, I've never been in it, but I flew into the airport. It is high-rise heaven all the way from from one end of the town to the other. It's a mess, and that's not good planning. And what you have now is not so much progressives pushing this agenda. It's libertarians pushing this agenda. Let the market run its course. Well, the market doesn't, as somebody once said, the market doesn't have a conscience. And, let me give you a statistic just to take home with you. In my survey that I do at UCLA countywide, 38% of the households in Los Angeles County earn less than $60,000 a year. 38% as a household earn less than $60,000 a year. 18%, almost 1 out of 5, earn less than $30,000 a year, total household income. You can't live your kids are making $200,000, let them try to live on $45,000 and have to rent a $1,500 apartment, $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year, and you're making $45,000 or $35,000 a year. You can't live in this town like that on that kind of money. Now, I don't have the answer to it, and I wish I have an answer for almost everything, but I don't have an answer for how you deal with this. But it's not just increasing supply. I'm not even saying don't increase supply, but don't increase supply everywhere. In West Los Angeles, there are places that could accommodate more density along the subway route. There are places in the San Fernando Valley that could accommodate more density. I don't want to get into your Agoura Hills politics, but even in the Conejo Valley, I mean, as a percentage of the total population, you could probably afford to find a place to put a couple of hundred units, rental units. But what is the redeeming social value of having more housing in Agoura Hills? Part of the whole idea of making the city more dense is so that they wouldn't encroach on the natural terrain out here. That it's not good for the environment, that building more out here would increase the carbon footprint, not reduce it. I don't have to talk, you have one of the world's great experts in Fran Pavley on that. So there is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and there isn't a right way and a wrong way. This is why I say you got to be willing. You can't take a bulldozer and steamroll every city and county in California. There will be a payday for this. Of course, all these legislators will be termed out and be off doing something else. But it's going to destroy the quality of life and affordability and inclusionary housing. I'm all for it. And I think that one of the ways you do that is if you're going to allow somebody to build something dense, don't just require them to build 10% or 15% affordable. Let them build 40% affordable. They're not making a dent in the homeless rate has gone up largely because people can't afford to live in their homes. It's not because of mental health or other issues. They may become mentally challenged after they've been on the streets for 5 years. But the thing that landed them on the street in the first place is that they got kicked out of their apartment. And you have mothers with their kids living on the streets. So you got to do, you got to, you know, if you're a captive of the real estate industry as a politician, if you can't say no to hedge fund folks, if you can't say no to the high-tech people who are investing in real estate, like the thing they were going to do out near Sacramento, build a brand new city. If you can't say no to your friends, then you don't belong in this business. But you know, as I said, when I ran for office, there was no Citizens United. There was no such thing as an independent expenditure committee. It was a totally different environment. Now, it's a different ballgame. And now, no offense to anybody who was in the state legislature, Fran was an outlier in that regard. She actually read the bills that she was voting on. Most of these guys don't read what they're voting on. It's cooked up in the back room. The speaker says you got to vote for it. The president pro tem says you got to vote for it, and they vote for it. And only the handful of people who actually know what they're voting on, or are smart enough to say, I don't know what I'm voting on, so I'm not going to vote on this thing that's being rushed through. There aren't enough people, they're not in the majority. That's my sermon for the evening.
We have
One more question, all right.
Well, I'll just talk about it.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank you for coming here today and your beautiful stories. I hiked the trail north of 101 freeway off of Las Virgenes, and I know it's named after you. And I wanted to know if you would be willing to share the story about that.
Thank you. In the longest named park in the LA County, the Zev Yaroslavsky Las Virgenes Highlands Park. Yeah, it's a great story. It was called Firehouse Hill was the nickname for it, and it's the most prominent view that you get when you're coming westbound on the Ventura Freeway and you're ascending and then descending into the Conejo Valley. And there was a guy who was a friend of Mike Antonovich who wanted to build, 60 or 70 homes up there, grade the hell out of the property, and tear down several hundred oak trees, some of which are ancient oak trees. And I hadn't been up to the site. I've driven by it 1,000 times going to John's Thanksgiving dinners, but I never really took a magnifying glass to it. And at one point, the guy called and he said, "I'd like to take you up and show you the property and show you what I want to do." And he was harassing me, and I said, "All right, I'm going to do this. I should know the property." And he took me up in his Jeep and he starts driving around, and it takes me up to the top, and it's this gorgeous view. And so when it was all over, he said, "So what do you think?" And I said, "I think you made a big mistake bringing me up here." I said, "Because this place shouldn't be touched, not for anything." And then he told me, "Oh, but the revenues from this is going to be my bar mitzvah gift to my son." Like he thought that was going to influence me. The biggest thing I ever got for my bar mitzvah was a few slices of turkey and stuffing that my dad cooked in the backyard. I said, "This doesn't impress me at all, but you're done." So basically is what I said. And he went bankrupt, fortunately. And then it was bought by Fred Sands, the realtor, who I knew. Not as well as I got to know him as a result of this, but I knew him. And he was a good guy. He was not a bad guy. And what he wanted to do was build a shopping center on the side of the hill that paralleled the freeway. And I said, "This area doesn't need another shopping center. I'm sorry. It's, we won't grade as much." I said, "Yeah, but you're going to generate a lot of traffic. It's like 300, 400,000 square feet. I don't remember what it was." And I said, "Why don't you just sell it to us, Fred?" And in the meantime, he came back to me and said, one of the mortuaries cemeteries needed more space. We built a cemetery out there. And I said, "Well, that won't generate any traffic." I said, "But, let me think about it." In the meantime, he finally called me, and Fred, and he says, I'm willing to negotiate a price with you. And so I had Joe Edmiston negotiate. I'm not a very good negotiator when it comes to real estate stuff. And Fred wanted $6.75 million for the property. And I thought, and I think the appraisal was $6.25 million. And I was pushing Joe not to give in, and then I stopped and I remembered that the property up above Pepperdine University, the Adamson property is what it was known. It's a gorgeous piece of property. It's about 1,200 feet above sea level. It's a different climate than the beach, and it's right above the beach. And the Adamsons wanted, I forgot what the number was. They wanted X, and I was demanding that I would only pay 0.9X. And they walked away, and then they sold it to Michael Milken. And then Milken decided he wanted to do this big baccalaureate. I don't even know what ever happened to the property. I don't think it's been developed, but he was grading it, and he was going to build a home here and a home there, and he was kind of incrementally doing it. And so when Fred offered 6.7, demanded 6.75, and I was demanding through Joe 6.25, finally I said, nah, just give him the 6.75. I don't want another Adamson property fiasco. And that's how we got the property. And it's a gorgeous piece of property. It's a really nice, modest hike. It's a great view. We saved a lot of oak trees.
And you'll be riding your horse up there.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, thank you, everybody. Round of applause for Zeb one more time.
Listen, am I gonna sign books out there?
Yes, we have a huge round of applause for John Lowson.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you so much, John. And more, a huge round of applause for Zeb Yaroslavsky.
Thank you.
So much for joining us. Zeb will be
Thank you very
signing
much.
books right over there, so if you have a book